I got this broken BMW M135i from Birmingham.
I had to get the car picked up on a recovery truck just to get it home.
That's because right now it doesn't run and isn't drivable. Well, that's not good.
Oh no. And there's a few reasons as to why this car isn't drivable. The first is a cylinder 4 misfire, which I've fixed. The second was an air leak coming from a rubber seal in the charge pipe, which luckily I've also fixed. The last one is the worst, as it's the reason that this car isn't drivable. I've just got to hope that it's an easy repair and the risk pays off.
Right, let's fix this car. Now, the entire reason that this car won't run and isn't drivable is because of this, which is the valvetronic. I couldn't tell you exactly what it does. All I know is it's something to do with the valves. It's a common fault on these cars, and mine is definitely going to be the reason why this car misfires. Well, at least I hope. And I think I've got a little bit of a theory to back it up. Last video I did a compression test on the engine and it read about 150 psi across all 6 cylinders. Now, one thing I forgot to do was actually put my foot on the accelerator when the engine was cranking. So I'm pretty sure that they will come up to 170-ish if I was to do that. So I'm not going to be worried at all about the compression. But one thing I have found out with this car, which makes me think that it's not the worst case scenario, is the previous owner before the guy that I got it off has actually reached out and told me exactly why this car ended up in the state it has ended up. The story goes on. This headlight, the car wasn't involved in an accident. This was actually a fairly large stone that flicked up, hit the lens and cracked it. The reason these wheels are in such bad condition and pretty much all of them are curbed is because the lad's girlfriend was driving the car and curbed them. That isn't me being sexist, that's just what I've been told. And he also told me the reason he actually got rid of this car was due to the valvetronic issue. Before that, it was running absolutely fine and he sent me the videos to prove it. He said that the engine was running lean, cylinders 1, 2 and 3 due to a lambda sensor, which has apparently since been changed. The MAF sensor, which I took out in the last video, has now been confirmed that that is a brand new MAF sensor, so I was right in assuming that it was. The rocker cover gasket was leaking and he pretty much told me that the car started to become quite problematic and he simply didn't have the time with his job to fix it all. So he sold the car and that is where we are today. So let's get to work.
First job is to disconnect the battery. Now I can move back into the engine bay and start by unplugging the two O2 sensors, remembering the grey wire is for the rear and the black one is for the front. Now I'm going to get the positive terminal wire out of the way and then unplug the valvetronic. Next, the bracket for the O2 sensors, then the breather pipe that goes to the rocker cover. Now I can remove all 6 coils, ready to remove the wiring harness so I can put it the other side of the engine. There's 3 8mm nuts holding the ground wires in place and then 6 plugs to each of the injectors. The last thing holding the wiring harness in is 2 T30 screws and I can now move that to the other side. Lastly, I can remove the valvetronic seal and then the bolts at the front of the engine holding the coolant pipes to the rocker cover.
So pretty much everything has been stripped off this rocker cover now, and the only things I think left apart from the main bolts holding it in is the fuel rail and these fuel lines going to the injectors, and I think this bit is going to be a little bit messy. So I'm going to get a rag and we're going to try and let all the fuel pressure out of the fuel lines without making too much mess.
First things first, I'm going to actually unplug that fuel rail from the wiring harness. Now I've got to release the pressure that's built up in the fuel lines by loosening the fasteners on each of the injectors.
Did that get you? Oh, how good does that smell?
Now that the pressure's been released, I can undo the other 5 lines going to the injectors and disconnect the main feed to the fuel rail. The last thing to do now is undo the 4 bolts that are attaching this fuel rail to the top of the engine block, and once they're all off, this fuel rail should be ready to take off.
There we go. One fuel rail out. There's one thing I forgot, and that is a YFOOD. Do you want one? These aren't diet drinks, they're not protein shakes, they are simply meal replacements.
And in each bottle of YFOOD, you will find a full and balanced ready to drink meal that keeps you full from 3 to 5 hours.
Now, holding this rocker cover in place is 26 of these eTorx bolts, which I've got to undo all of them. There's also 26 vitamins and minerals in one of these YFOOD drinks. Before I undo the rest of them, I'm going to have a quick meal. So good. Now, if you're not sure on which flavour you're going to like, then don't worry, because I've got the perfect thing for you. This is the YFOOD Taster Pack, and it comes with 5 of YFOOD's best flavours. And if I'm honest, some of these are actually already empty. So if you're not sure on what flavour you like, I'd definitely recommend getting the Taster Pack and trying them all, and then you can decide which is your favourite. So if you are interested in getting yourself some YFOOD, you can use the link on the screen now, or hit the link in the description or pinned comment. It will take you straight to YFOOD with a bit of discount, and you can try them for yourself. Let's get the rest of these off. Let's get this rocker cover off the engine. Okay, I think all of the bolts are loose. I'm pretty sure I haven't missed any of them. And I think the rocker cover can come off. I'm just gonna pry a little bit on the sides, and I'm hoping yes. There we go. Rocker cover off. That was a bigger job than I thought.
That was definitely one of the more time consuming and complicated rocker covers I've ever had to take off, but now it's off, we can take a closer look.
This is of course everything that is under that rocker cover. So we have the timing chain, which, well, to me seems in pretty good condition and seems pretty tight. We have the intake cams, which luckily there's no scoring on any of the bearings or anything that you don't really want to see. It's pretty obvious as to why this car was leaking oil, because pretty much everywhere around where the rocker cover should sit is damp or wet with oil, and clearly whoever put the rocker cover on last hasn't torqued them up to spec. But what we want to concentrate on and what we want to try and remove is this valvetronic motor here. There's a little oil feed going to it that we also need to remove, but to get to that valvetronic motor we need to remove this, which I'm going to call the injector bucket. We need to remove the one on the left and the one on the right, but to remove them we need to take out the injectors, and to take out the injectors we need a special tool.
The injectors on this engine aren't like your typical injectors that you just pull and they come out. You actually need a special tool designed for this engine specifically, which I've had to buy just to get these injectors out.
To use these, some of them work anti-clockwise, some of them work clockwise, and we have pretty much got to align this with the injectors to somehow get them out. So I'm going to build this tool. I've got to quickly remove this plate here, which is obviously in between the injectors, and then we're going to try and get them out and hope that this works.
These are the injector retainers, and I need to remove them before I can take the injectors out. To get them out, there's two 10mm bolts holding them in place.
What that's for, I don't know. I'm guessing it's just to hold the injectors in place, but that needs to come out, and that one.
Now I can remove the other retaining clip and start getting the injectors out. I need to first secure the injector removal tool in place with the 2 long black bolts. Then I've got to screw in the 2 larger knobs onto the injectors, and using a 24mm spanner turn the lower part of the knobs clockwise, this slowly pulling the injectors out of the head. You can actually see the injectors coming out each turn of the spanner.
Now if I undo the entire tool, that should bring the injectors with it. Yes! Boom! And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how with zero experience you remove M135 injectors. What a absolute job. Why can they not just be as simple as the other ones? I'm not actually sure on these engines if these injectors are coded to each cylinder, but just in case, I am marking them by how I've took them off. So of course this one is number 1, I'm going to mark number 2, and then we need to get 3 and 4 out, and hopefully then we can get the little injector buckets off. I've never done any engine work like this before, so bear with me, I'm learning as I go.
Now I can repeat the exact same process that I used on the first 2 injectors on injectors 3 and 4 using my new removal tool, and luckily they came out really easy.
There we go, number 3 and number 4.
And now those 4 injectors are out, the only thing stopping us getting to that valvetronic motor are the 2 injector buckets on the left hand side and the right hand side. To get these out, there's 2 T30 bolts inside the buckets themselves. I've got to unscrew those without dropping the bolt into the injector holes. So I'm going to use a microfiber towel to block off the holes while I take the bolts out, and then the bucket should be able to lift out.
Now, as far as I know, to get these buckets off, you simply need to pull. There we go. 2 buckets, and then there is 2 gaskets hidden underneath. Now we are on to the actual repair itself, which of course is the valvetronic motor. And to get this out, we've got this eccentric shaft, I think it's called, just here, and I've somehow got to turn the valvetronic motor at the same time as hold the tension on this shaft from springing back and damaging itself. So to start with, I've got to take this oil feed off that goes to the valvetronic, get that out of the way, and then yeah, I've somehow got to get this off. I've been told that if I let the tension go with the spanner and the shaft does spin back on itself because it's spring loaded, like, it's game over. I need a whole new eccentric shaft, and it is apparently a costly job if it goes wrong. So I've kind of got one take at this. If it goes wrong, it's going to cost me a lot of money. If it goes right, then we fix the car. And once I've taken the old valvetronic motor out that has gone faulty, we have this OEM BMW one to go in. The part number is the exact same as the one on the car, and I actually got this from a good friend of mine and a supporter of the channel who actually had a engine malfunction on his BMW M2, and they actually share the exact same valvetronics. The engine that I got this off of had only done 40,000 miles, and these are about £400, and he very kindly let me go and take it off his engine free of charge. So shout out to Nathan. We've got a OEM part going back on. All we've got to do now is get the old one off. So let's do it.
First job is to carefully remove that tiny little oil feed that feeds oil to the valvetronic motor. Now I've got to undo the stopper so I can turn this eccentric shaft all the way round, therefore disconnecting it from the shaft of the valvetronic.
It is now the moment of truth. I am going to put this into the valvetronic motor, and I want to be turning this anti-clockwise and then holding tension on this shaft itself. So we're going to give this a go. If it goes wrong, well, it's coming out my pocket. So let's see.
I've just got to make sure that I'm really careful. I take my time and I concentrate on exactly what I'm doing because I don't want this to turn into a costly job. But luckily I managed to wind that eccentric shaft all the way back, and now I can remove the valvetronic motor.
That's one bolt. That's two. And three. This is the moment of truth. Can we get this valvetronic motor out? Which we can. This, I hope, is the answer to all of my problems with this car not being able to run. This is the valvetronic motor, and this is apparently what has gone wrong. And in all fairness, it does seem just very... That just seems very, very loose. You know what I mean? Just seems very, yeah, kind of disconnected. Whereas the new one, it doesn't have as much play and as easy of play as this one. I don't really know the difference. I just hope that somewhere internally that is knackered. We are getting electronic fault, so maybe the problem with that isn't actually visible. But for now, let's just install the new valvetronic motor and see if we can get this shaft back onto this new motor.
Now I can put the new low mileage valvetronic in its position and tighten up the bolts, but with a job like this I need to make sure that they're torqued to spec.
So luckily this website called FCP Euro, I've got all of the torque specs for pretty much everything that I've taken off. So the 3 Y bolts going onto the cylinder head that attach the servo motor, they are 10 Newton meters. So there we go. Okay, now I can do my best to get this shaft back in sync with this motor. So I'm going to undo the little stopper just here.
Now I can reverse the process of what I did to get this valvetronic motor off. So with my left hand I'm going to spin the motor clockwise while holding tension with my right hand, and once it's up to the top of its maximum position I can then put the stopper back in its place, and that is the eccentric shaft mated with the valvetronic motor. I can now torque down that stopping pin, which it needs 10 Newton meters, and of course not forgetting to reinstall the little oil feed that goes to the shaft itself. This is also 10 Newton meters. And I'm not wasting any time at all. I want to get this thing built back up so I can turn it on and restart the car in this video. So I'm going to install 2 new gaskets for the injector buckets, and then I can reinstall the 2 bolts holding them to the head of the engine. These are 2 T30 bolts, and everything so far was going really well, and it was only a matter of time until I made a huge mistake.
The bolts have snapped.
I think with the excitement of getting the hardest part of the job out the way, I got a little bit carried away and set my torque wrench way too high, therefore snapping one of the bolts in the head of the engine.
I've just made a pretty drastic mistake. For some reason I over tightened that bolt. In my head I thought it was too tight, but I kept going, just waiting for my torque wrench to do that little click, and it didn't, and now the bolt has snapped in the head, and there's that little kind of recess, which means I wouldn't even be able to get any more grips on it. Oh, it was all going so well. And the last thing I want to do is make things even worse, so I think in this circumstance I'm going to have to call in some help of someone that's good at extracting bolts, that knows what they're doing, that can give me a little bit of help or advice getting that snapped bolt out, because I have no clue. Let's get some help.
So the next morning, Barry from Road Speed Developments came to give me a helping hand. He's got an extractor tool, which is a tool specifically designed for bolts that have snapped in their place. And after about 10 minutes of Barry drilling and using the extractor tool, he managed to get the bolt out, quite literally saving the car and saving the video. I really appreciate it if you guys could go down in the comments below and give a thank you to Barry, and also follow Road Speed Developments on Instagram and tell them that I sent you. Thankfully, we can now get this engine back together. Now I can go ahead and reinstall the 2 gaskets for the injector buckets and the injector buckets themselves, this time making sure I torque them down correctly. And once they're on, I can now reinstall the injectors. I'm not going to be using the tool for this because these simply push into place, and I'm just going to give them a couple of little taps with a rubber mallet just to make sure they're nice and snug. I can now fit the injector retainer clips, and that should be the rocker cover ready to go back on. Now before I install that rocker cover, I'm going to make sure that the surface where the gasket sits is nice and clean. So I'm just going to clean it with a rag to make sure that when we reinstall it, it doesn't leak any more oil. Now I can go ahead and get the old gasket off, which was pretty obvious as to why it was leaking in the first place, because this was brittle. It literally broke off in my hands.
Oh my god, you can eat. All makes sense now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's definitely the original then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now I can install the brand new rocker cover gasket and hope that this one doesn't leak. And now that rocker cover is ready to be tightened down, there's actually a sequence in which order you should tighten these bolts, so I'm going to make sure that I follow it. Now that's all tightened down to spec, it's time to rebuild and refit everything that we took off to get the rocker cover out. So I'm going to start with the fuel rail. I can install it, plug it back in, and make sure I tighten all of the fuel lines going down to the injectors. Next up is the positive terminal, which I can just fit on the left hand side strut tower. I can now refit the wiring harness for all the coils and plug back in all 6 of the injectors. And of course, not forgetting the 3 little nuts holding in the ground. Now I can install the coils, and I think we're getting to the end of the job. The last thing to do now is refit the little bracket that holds on the 202 sensors, remembering that the grey wire is the one for the back of the engine. After that, I can refit the little breather pipe that goes to the rocker cover just behind the oil cap, and then it's time to reconnect the battery and see what happens.
There we go, battery is back on. Back on. Okay, everything I think is back together. So while Barry is here, I am just going to let him use his diagnostic machine to do the relearning on the valvetronic. I'm pretty sure my diagnostic machine will be able to do it, but he's previously done one of these engines on his machine, so we know that it is definitely going to be able to do the job. Everything's torqued down, the fuel rail's back on, the lambda sensors are plugged back in, the coils are plugged back in, the valvetronic's plugged in. I think we're good to turn it on, and hopefully this valvetronic can relearn itself or whatever they need to do. I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope for the best. This is moment of truth. Let's turn it on and let's see what it does. This is either going to be great or really, really, really bad. The ignition comes on. Let's turn the car on. It turns on. It turns on. And it's not misfiring. It's not misfiring. It's not misfiring. Right. What we need to do now is do a relearn on the valvetronic to make sure that it is in sync. Okay, it's a little bit lumpy, but that is because we need to do that relearn, so let's do that.
And now that that engine's running, it's time to relearn the adaptive values of the valvetronic. This is going to cycle the engine 450 times just to make sure that it's doing exactly what it should be. And now that it's relearnt itself and done them 450 cycles, it's going to then do a further 50. This is a self-test that the car is doing on its own. What we're hoping to see now is 50 successful cycles of the valvetronic, and if we can get that in 2 to 10 minutes, it means that the valvetronic motor is good to go and is all in sync.
Yeah. There we go. No fault codes at all. So that one that I couldn't clear, even with just the ignition on without the engine being turned on, that wasn't clearable, has now gone completely, and the relearning stage has been done on the valvetronic. Would you say that's all right?
I'd say that's all right.
Oh mate, I think, would you say that's okay to drive then?
I mean, the valvetronic's certainly working, so that's that problem fixed at least.
Mate. And of course that smoke that was coming from the back of the rocker cover has now dispersed and is no longer smoking. Mate, smashed it. And I'd have been still stuck with that bolt if it weren't for you.
It's working now, so that's amazing.
Mate, I am buzzing. No way that has actually worked. Right, on to the next job of getting everything back together. And I think it's time to take it for a drive.
But then after turning the car on and getting ready to go drive it for the first time, we started to notice a little bit of a misfire.
So we have done, was it an idle learn on the engine, and we have actually got a couple of fault codes come up. One of them being a cylinder 1 misfire detected. Now, if you remember from last video, we had a cylinder 4 misfire detected, so I swapped cylinder 4 with cylinder 1, and now we can see that the engine's working fine, but that misfire has followed to cylinder 1. So just to make sure, I'm going to move cylinder 1 to cylinder 2 and see if it follows again. If it does, then we know it's just a simple coil pack issue and I can get that solved. If not, then it might just be a spark plug, but at least we know that that valvetronic problem has definitely gone away. So the main problem with this car is fixed, which is good. Okay, let's swap these round, plug them back in. And we'll see if it follows.
So I turned the car back on and let it idle for about 5 minutes and nothing really happened, so I gave it a few revs and then we got a fault code come up on the diagnostic tool. This time it was telling us again that the cylinder 1 had been shut off due to a misfire, something I'm going to have to take a look at, but for now Barry has got to get back to work, so a massive thank you to him for coming out and helping me. Although he didn't do the job for me, it was definitely reassuring to have him there to make sure that I did everything correctly.
What an absolute result. That valvetronic issue is now no longer. So clearly this old valvetronic motor internally / electrically just went bad and wasn't longer doing what it should be. But a massive thank you to Nathan for the valvetronic motor, a massive thank you to Barry. This car is nearly ready to be driven, but we have got that little misfire that's taking place currently on cylinder 1. So we have eliminated the coils. Now I'm going to swap the spark plug over and see if it then follows. If not, it may be an injector. Fingers crossed is another good result.
I don't personally know when the last time the spark plugs in this engine were changed, so there's potential that one of them could have just gone a little bit bad, but I guess that's now up to me to find out.
Okay, let's see if the misfire has followed, and I'm now hoping that on the diagnostic tool we have a cylinder 2 misfire. That would be best case scenario, meaning that we just need another spark plug, but let's see. Okay, first things first, I am going to clear the fault codes, to which we now have no trouble codes at all. I'm now going to start the car, which you can still feel a tiny little, just like something isn't right. I'm going to go to automatic scan again, Okay, so it's not picked anything up as of yet. Let's just give it a minute to tick over and we'll see if anything changes in the engine, and then I'll rescan it and hopefully we'll see that cylinder 2 misfire. Let's try scan it again. Okay, we now have one fault code. That fault code is an air mass. What? Well, as of now, the only fault code I've got is the air mass system. Calculated air masses in the air intake system, not plausible. We have got no cylinder misfires at all. Do you know what's weird? Is, what's this? There's that one fault code. Okay, so it is still a current. That's plugged in. I don't know with this one, but all I do know is we have now got no misfire codes, just that air plausible. What I'm going to do, I'm going to drive it up and down the driveway. I'm going to move it back and forth.
And after moving the car up and down the driveway, just putting it in gear to see if anything changes, nothing did. I still had that one plausible air mass fault code on the scan tool. So I think on this occasion, I'm going to bite the bullet and attempt to drive the car for the first time, just to see if anything pops up.
I'm going to completely clear all the fault codes on the system. So we currently have no fault codes whatsoever. I'm going to turn the car on. The engine light's gone off. Still quite lumpy. So I'm just going to redo the scan, which we currently have no fault codes. This just doesn't make sense. Do you know what? Let's just drive it. Let's just drive it and see what happens. It's not happy, is it? The whole car is shaking. Maybe this isn't such a good idea. Here we go. We are driving the BMW M135i for the first time, and it is, yeah, it's not happy. It is really, really struggling. I mean, if I start putting my foot down, it kind of gets worse. But it's driving, and there's no horrible knocks or bangs or anything that I can hear as of now. Do you want to do a rescan and see what it says? See if it's giving us anything? Nothing. Nothing on the scan tool, but it is definitely misfiring. Maybe I should actually try and put my foot down a little bit just to see if it, oh my god, it barely even reverses. It's like it's in limp mode, but I've got no engine light. I'm going to put my foot down and just see what happens. Oh, we've got an error. Possible to continue journey, full performance not available, have the problem checked by your service provider. We have also got an engine light on with that fault code. Scan it through. 4. We've got 4 fault codes. Okay, the car is actually talking to us now. Diagnose, please be cylinder 2 misfire. Oh my god! It's a spark plug. It is the spark plug. Misfire on cylinder 2, fuel injection is switched off, and the car is not happy at all. I'm pretty sure it's that spark plug. Let's get this car home.
So I'm going to head straight to Motor Parts Direct in Derbyshire so I can get these 6 spark plugs.
As per usual, big shout out to Motor Parts Direct. 6 spark plugs. Let's go fix this BMW once and for all. Come on.
And now I'm hoping that this is the last job and the first time that I've actually changed 6 spark plugs on an engine. I'm normally used to 4.
Well, this is the moment of truth. 6 brand new spark plugs. I'm just hoping that that is the correct fix, and yeah, once we turn this car on, I'm hoping for no fault codes whatsoever, and I'm hoping that we can go out and actually drive it. So first, let me clear the fault code so we have a fresh start. One thing it actually hasn't done since we changed that valvetronic motor is make that horrible grinding noise. So I'm definitely saying that that problem is sorted, but we're going to go automatic scan. I am going to clear that. Trouble codes, no trouble codes found. Right, is it going to misfire? It's not misfiring. That's not misfiring at all. Have we got any codes come back? None at all on the engine control module. That's not misfiring. I'm like shaking because I'm that nervous to see if it's going to misfire again. I think that Kia has definitely scarred me. That's not misfiring at all. Is literally perfect. You could pretty much balance a coin on the engine. It is running that good. I honestly cannot believe, after all of that and all of the doubt in the comment section when I first got this car, that I think as of now it is actually fixed. Let's take it for a drive. Here we go. Attempt number 2. No misfiring. Oh my god, is this car actually fixed? We are out on the road, no engine lights. The gearbox works perfectly. Everything. There's a couple of little knocks and bangs, but I think that's something in the interior, but wow. It actually drives really nice. The steering wheel is perfectly straight. Everything seems to work. And again, we've got no engine lights, we've got no fault codes, we have got a perfectly working BMW. I'm going to say this was definitely 100% worth the risk, but I think it would be rude not to get a little bit of a straight road and put my foot down and see exactly what the power is like. Here we go. Well, I'm definitely saying that it's fixed. Whey! We've got this little button here. We're in comfort. Now we can turn it to sport, and then Sport Plus, which has the traction control already off as default, and it makes the exhaust sound way nicer. Put it in manual. It's definitely quicker in Sport Plus. What a cool little car, man. The fact that this little car has got a massive 3-litre 6-cylinder engine in it is absolutely crazy, but do you know what? The handling is really, really nice. Like, this isn't even an M car, this is a baby M car, and I'm actually really impressed with it. I do kind of get the BMW hype now. I just got a lot of confidence from the seating position, from the engine, from the steering. What a car to say we have fixed it from quite literally barely even running. Let's go again. Drop it to second. That is such a rewarding feeling. Such a rewarding feeling, man. Even on the screen here, we have got the horsepower gauge and also a torque gauge. So this goes up to 320 horsepower, and when I put my foot down, you'll actually see it all increase. I just think that is something that is so cool to have as a standard feature in a car. The gearbox feels amazing. The gears are very, I do like the DCT gearboxes. They feel very kind of notchy. It's almost how I'd think a Lamborghini would kind of shift. Instead of it being kind of DSG where the next gear is waiting, these kind of just bang you into the gears, and it's something that's just really, really satisfying to change gear in one of these. But wow, what a car. Well, there we go. The BMW M135i lives on, and I understand why so many people had such doubt about this car, but here we are. It works, it drives, and it is a pretty fun car. But the story for this car doesn't end here. There's a few more things that need replacing, like the headlight. We need to do the wheels, and I want a little vote in the comments below if you think I should do a couple of little cheap modifications to this car, maybe increase the horsepower and then swap it on, or if I should quite literally repair it and move it on. But for now, thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, please like, comment and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.
You wear a hat they call dad. Me, I'm the dad in a hat. You just like clubbing and clothes. Me, I like afternoon naps. 3, I be missed for the road. My oldest like counting racks. My middle one, she's in a dirt bike. My youngest is just like a mama. The mama loves me and I love her, so if she wants something, it's never a bother. 3 little ladies, my babies in one.